Every year on March 8th, the world posts flowers. They write Happy Women's Day on Instagram. They run sales. They hand out chocolates. But almost no one knows the real story. Almost no one knows that this day was born in blood, in smoke, in the screams of 146 women falling from a burning building because the doors were locked, and the men who locked them walked free. This is not a story about flowers. This is a story about revolution. Stay with me, because the truth of March 8th will change how you see this day forever. It is 1908. The place, New York City. The women who built America's fashion industry earned roughly $7 a week, the equivalent of about $230 today. For 52 hours of labor in windowless rooms, packed with cloth and dust and cigarette smoke, they couldn't vote. They couldn't hold public office. If they got hurt on the job, there was no compensation. If they complained, they were replaced the next morning. But something was changing inside them. Quietly, in whispers between sewing machines, something was building. In the fall of 1909, a 19-year-old immigrant named Clara Lemlich had already been beaten by hired thugs for union organizing, her ribs broken. And yet she stood up in a packed union hall, interrupted a room full of cautious male speakers, and demanded action. The next morning, over 15,000 garment workers walked off the job across New York City. They called it the Uprising of the 20,000. And just 1 year later, on November the 6th, 1909, the Socialist Party of America officially declared the first National Women's Day in the United States. But if America started this, why does the whole world celebrate it? The answer is one woman, one room, one idea, and it happened in Copenhagen. August 1910, the Second International Socialist Women's Conference. Over 100 female delegates from 17 countries packed into a single room, and among them, Clara Zetkin, editor, orator, and political strategist from Germany. Clara had a radical idea. Not just a Women's Day for America, not just for Germany. A single, unified day, every year, in every country on earth, where women would demand their rights out loud, together, simultaneously. She stood up and proposed it, and every single delegate in that room voted yes. Think about what that meant in 1910. No internet, no global telephone network. International travel took weeks, and yet these women were building a worldwide movement using nothing but conviction and ink. They didn't pick a specific date that year, but the seed was planted. And in 1911, International Women's Day was celebrated for the first time on March 19th in Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland. More than 1 million people took to the streets. 1 million people. In 1911, they demanded the right to vote, the right to hold public office, the right to be paid equally for equal work. But 6 days after that first celebration, something happened that set the movement on fire in a way no one expected. March 25th, 1911, 6 days after that first International Women's Day celebration. It was a Saturday afternoon at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in Manhattan. 3 floors of the Ash Building near Washington Square Park, crammed with 500 workers. At 4:40 p.m., a fire ignited in a scrap bin on the 8th floor. Within minutes, it consumed all 3 floors. The workers ran, but the exit doors had been locked from the outside, a common practice by factory owners who wanted to prevent workers from taking breaks or stealing fabric. The fire ladders couldn't reach above the 6th floor. The The single fire escape collapsed under the weight of fleeing bodies. 146 people died in 18 minutes. 123 of them were women and girls. The youngest was just 14 years old. Many of them jumped. Witnesses on the street below stood frozen, watching. When the owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, were eventually brought to trial, they were acquitted. The insurance company paid them $400 per life lost. They actually profited. The city erupted. On April 5th, 100,000 people marched in silence through New York streets behind the hearses. That grief transformed into law. New York passed sweeping factory safety regulations. Labor unions gained momentum that would eventually reach the White House. But here's the question nobody asks. How did a protest in New York and a conference in Copenhagen become the reason a czar lost his throne? February 23rd, 1917, on the old Russian calendar. March 8th, by the calendar the rest of the world used. In the city of Petrograd, now known as St. Petersburg, Russia was deep in the devastation of World War I. Soldiers were dying by the hundreds of thousands. Bread had disappeared from the shelves. Children were starving. The women, textile workers, had had enough. They chose International Women's Day as the moment to act. They walked out of their factories, flooded the streets, and began calling for other workers to join them. Their chant, bread and peace. What started as a march became a general strike. What became a general strike became a revolution. Within 5 days, Tsar Nicholas II, ruler of the largest empire on earth, had abdicated his throne. The new government immediately granted women the right to vote. Let that sink in. A group of hungry, exhausted working women on International Women's Day started the chain of events that ended 3 centuries of Romanov rule. This is why we celebrate on March 8th. This day was not chosen randomly. It was chosen because women chose it and changed history on it. After revolutions and world wars, and a century of marching, it still took until 1975 for the world's governments to officially recognize this day. Why so long? In 1975, 64 years after those first million marchers took to European streets, the United Nations officially began observing International Women's Day on March 8th. 2 years later, in 1977, the UN General Assembly invited all member nations to formally proclaim a day dedicated to women's rights and international peace. It was no longer a socialist holiday, no longer an American labor protest. It belonged to every nation on earth. And yet, today, in 2025, the gender pay gap still exists in every single country on earth. Women still earn less than men for equivalent work. Girls in dozens of countries are still denied the right to an education. Women in conflict zones are still weaponized, their bodies used as tools of war. The fight those women started in the sweatshops of Manhattan, in the conference rooms of Copenhagen, in the frozen streets of Petrograd, it is not finished. It has never stopped. Clara Lemlich, with broken ribs, chose to speak. Clara Zetkin, with no global infrastructure, chose to unite. 1 million women, with no votes and no guaranteed safety, chose to march. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for comfort. They acted when the cost of silence became higher than the cost of speaking. Now it's our turn. Not just on March 8th, every day. The question is not whether this story matters. The question is, what will you do with it?